have my Saint Anger hoodie on. I can. There we go.
Awesome. Well, I guess on that note, we should get started. Maybe I'll start the
Woo!
video like right there.
Oh,
Because it's important to show all the things that we brought. And so you brought your hoodie. I don't have any kind of Saint Anger attire to wear,
I actually have.
unfortunately.
I have my Saint Anger T-shirt on. I'm Saint Angered out.
I've always wanted to get that one that has like I don't know if it's Japanese or Chinese writing all over it, and it's got the Saint Anger fist. They
Yes.
sell that on their store every once in a while, and I'm always like, that looks pretty cool. But I have a hard time buying shirts when it's not at a show. I just can't pull the trigger for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I don't. The only thing I kind of do that at this point for is Saint Anger stuff, but yeah, with T-shirts, it's people buy concert T-shirts. Like I don't really get them unless I'm at a show that it was at. So
yeah.
yeah.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, this lovely lady that you're hearing from right here is Jamilah, and she has a podcast called. What's so funny? She has a podcast called Music and We. That she does. Is it mostly just you, or is there? Is it
It's with me and Jesse. So
Jesse?
yeah, and it started out initially as a Prince and Michael Jackson related podcast. He actually worked for Prince for a little bit. And
Oh,
so
nice.
he had his knowledge about that. And I actually, prior to MJ's passing, I was in the midst of writing a book. So I had studied this dude immensely. And so our podcast was around a lot of that stuff. But then they both were gone, and I don't really follow a lot of posthumous stuff. So it's like, well, we don't really have a lot to talk about. So we started exploring other types of music and a lot of things around music.
Yeah.
And so, of course, we talk a lot about Metallica. We talk
Hmm.
a lot about different types of music. But my whole thing is Saint Anger. I'm always
Yeah.
probably almost every episode talking about Saint Anger.
Yeah, I mean that was the one of the big deals when you first emailed me asking me to be on the podcast. Like I was already like, well, yeah, sure, of course I'll do it. But you put that little nugget in there that you were a fan of Saint Anger, and I'm like, oh well, then I gotta go. It's like because there's not
Yeah.
there. I mean, there are a lot of us, but you would think because of the presence online that there wasn't very many of us.
Right.
But so I did your podcast, and it was a lot of fun. It's a great episode. I'll put a link in the description for you guys to go check out her stuff. But I knew that I wanted to do a video for the 20th anniversary of Saint Anger, which when this video comes out will be today, the day that it comes out. And at first I was just struggling with what I was going to do. Like, is it another video of me sitting in front of my records and I talk about my experience? And like, it's because I feel like I've already said a lot of the things that I need to say. And I was like, well, Jamilah loves that album probably even more than I do. So I was just like, all right, well, we should do this. It'll be a Saint Anger 20th anniversary conversation from two fans. So if you've come to this video and you're like, when's the shit talking going to happen? There will be zero shit talking except for us talking shit about the haters of Saint Anger. And and there's like no plan. The only planning I did was I pulled out all my Saint Anger shit, which is, what do I got? This is an original Electra pressing from 2003. This is the Some Kind of Monster 7-inch that has the Ramones cover on the other side. We're a Happy Family. This is the Frantic 12-inch, which has the Uncle Frantic a remix by Uncle of Frantic on the other side. This is the Black and Records reissue that my wife bought for me when we first started dating. Because I had put off buying Saint Anger because I was like, well, I want an original. I don't just want some repressed black vinyl version. But she bought it for me like as a present. I was like, well, shit, I'm keeping it forever now. And then, of course, this is the Walmart reissue, whatever color that is. I don't remember. And then this is the Unnamed Feeling picture disc 12-inch single that on the other side has Leper Messiah live. And then down here, Saint Anger CD, DVD, and then some kind of monster EP. That's like all. I guess I could have gotten the movie out as well, but that's my collection. And as far as I know, that's pretty much everything aside from CD singles that they put out. But my Metallica collection is I get everything vinyl, and then if it was never released on vinyl, then I buy a CD. Like I have like the I Disappear, promotional single on CD. But yeah. Anyway, so I brought all that out, and that is the only planning I did. I'm like, we're just gonna have a discussion about Saint Anger, logically starting from when it came out, and just kind of move on from there. Because
Yes.
you've talked a lot. Not only have you talked a lot about Saint Anger on your podcast, you did a gargantuan documentary that I watched. Like I watched, what was it, 6 hours long? Is it 6 hours? And I just had it on while I was working, and I was just, it was great. It was nice to have on because it's just a bunch of people talking about an album that I really like. But it's out there on YouTube. I can put links to that as well. But it's basically like her telling her story about the album and her life, but also interviewing other people and getting their 2 cents. And unfortunately, she didn't know me at that point, so I didn't get to be a part of it. So this will be for like the director's cut. Like when you
Yes.
re-edit it together, you can put this like in the middle somewhere. But anyway, so let's start from the beginning. In 2002, 20 years ago today, so if I remember right, you weren't like a really like into all the Metallica goings on at that point, were you?
I was not following them to the extent that I'm probably following them now.
Yeah.
I got into Metallica when I was 14. So it was 1990 or so.
Hmm.
And then I first saw them live in 1991, December 3rd, 1991. So it was the first leg of the Black Album tour, or the Wherever We May Roam tour, you know it's called.
Yeah.
And then I didn't see them live until 30 years later at the 40th anniversary. So in between those two times, it was just kind of a back and forth push and pull. I saw Some Kind of Monster when it came out,
Hmm.
but I wasn't extensively following them like that. So I didn't even get Saint Anger when it came out. Like I knew the music, but I didn't buy it until years later. And yeah, and the reason why it became one of my favorite albums of all time. So I don't know. I have to find someone like me, because Saint Anger is in the top 10 of the greatest albums of all time to me. And so I don't know if anyone else feels that way, but my favorite album of all time is What's Going On. So
Wow, that
Marvin
is.
Gaye, Saint Anger is up there with that album for me. So,
Yeah. I mean that both very impactful albums in different ways. So
yeah. So I need to find someone who also thinks that Saint Anger is a top 10 of all that, not just of Metallica, but of all time, of every album in the whole world. And I keep getting told I'm the only person, I'm the biggest Saint Anger fan. I think there are people out there who are bigger fans than me. I don't know. I have to find those people because
If any of you happen to watch this, chime in and let her know. Is do you think Saint Anger's better than What's Going On? I mean, I think it's better than What's Going On, but that's just because I'm into metal a lot.
yeah. But yeah, I haven't heard anyone say that it is among the greatest albums of all time. I think so. And I didn't really feel that way until after I became an amputee. So 10-second story. I got hit by a truck when I was on my bicycle, became an amputee about a month later. So
She goes into detail about all that in the documentary if you really want to know. It was a tough time for her, to say the least.
yes. And so what ended up happening was, even though so about a week to a few days before the accident, I would just listen to one on repeat. And then I would go, after I came from my job, I would listen to Battery. And then,
Hmm.
there would be Metallica songs, like go-to Metallica songs. But it wasn't until I became an amputee where I went through their whole catalog chronologically.
Hmm.
and a lot changed for me. So much shifted in terms of my relationship to the songs, and Saint Anger became that in
Yeah.
terms of my own mental shifts and everything. And a light bulb just went off, and Saint Anger just became to me one of the greatest albums of all time.
Yeah, I think that in what there was that interview with James Hetfield where he said the album found its audience or whatever, and so mine is similar to yours in the respect that in 2003 I was following Metallica just because they had been a favorite band of mine for such a long time. But what had happened by then was at first I didn't like Load, and then I grew to like it. And then they put out Reload, and I'm like, well, this is more of the same, and it doesn't really do much for me. Then they put out Garage Inc., and I'm like, well, only a couple of those new covers are really that great to me. At that point, I was just like, all right, well, maybe it's that point where I'm moving on. And I was listening to other stuff. I was listening to like Radiohead and all this other shit. Like I was branching out musically, and a lot of metal didn't do anything for me, and so I kind of left a lot of it behind. But I always, whenever there was like a Metallica thing on MTV or anything, I would always check it out because I'm not like, those are my boys from back in the day, so I'm going to check them out. So I remember watching the MTV Icon thing when they first came out with Rob. And then they didn't play anything new at that. I think they just played older shit at that. Or did they even play at that?
I think at the end when the credits were rolling, they played Frantic.
Maybe that's okay. I just remember that the first like actual song I heard was when they put out the video for Saint Anger, the Saint Anger song. And so there were two really major thoughts that I had. The first major thought was, this is not going to drive me to go buy this album. It doesn't really do much for me. But funny enough, the second thought that I had was, that is fucking awesome how they made the snare sound. Like I was so just like, are they going for like an industrial hardcore kind of thing? Like what is this? And I was so just fascinated by it to where I was like, that's so cool that they just said, fuck you, we're going to have this obnoxious snare. And I thought it was great. That was the one selling point in the beginning. But flash forward a few years to, really, like I didn't have anything major in my life like you did happen, but what did happen was I rediscovered metal through a couple newer bands, one of them being Mastodon. That's a really big band for me. And they kind of brought me back into metal, but also they said, in my brain, I went, well, I like all of this stuff. Now I'm going to go back to all this shit that I loved when I was young. And lo and behold, it all still fucking rules. And so then I just sort of, and this would have been 2005 maybe that this was all happening, maybe 2006. And so very quickly I became full-blown metalhead again and went back and rediscovered all the Metallica stuff. But it really wasn't until Death Magnetic. Death Magnetic is still one of my favorite Metallica albums, and it made me like feel like a kid again as a fan. So I got so excited about all this stuff that I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna go buy Saint Anger. And I went to so this would have been like 2008, 2009. Yeah. I went to a record store, a used CD store, because I was like, they gotta have it. People fucking hate this album. And yeah, they had 2 or 3 copies. And so I bought the CD DVD combo thing of Saint Anger. And I listened to that thing in my car for like a week. And I was just like, this is the most interesting Metallica album I've ever heard. I was just so... Now, at that point, I wasn't 100% like I like it. There were certain parts that I had to get used to and certain like lyrical things that I kind of went, oh, that's a little bit cringy, that little lyric right there. And just a few parts that now I like them because of the... what's a good word? It was almost like they were in my face in a way that I wasn't comfortable with. Like whether or not it was something really strange that James was doing with his vocals or just words that I had never heard James say before in a song kind of thing. And so it was almost like it was it was, daring me to like the album. Like, fuck you. What do you call yourself a fan? Come on. And then over the years, from that point on, every time I would be like, I want to listen to Saint Anger, every time I'd put it on, it got better and better and better, to where over the past few years, I've now become like the champion of the unfairly maligned album, which the big one is Saint Anger, because now I'm just like, okay, now I'm at the point in my life where I'm like, I fucking love this album. I can still understand why some people don't like it, but now it's become almost like a meme or something, where like it's already pre-programmed. So it's like, oh, are you a brand new metalhead? Well, make sure you get your Slayer back patch and make sure you talk shit about Saint Anger and Lars. And so a lot of times I know that it's people that like probably just don't really care for the album, but the thing to do now is to make jokes and talk shit. And I'm like, fuck that. I'm going to be the polar opposite of that. I'm going to be the person that's like, this album should be held up with their greatest stuff. And to be fair, if you don't like it, I don't consider you a Metallica fan. So there you go. You can be a fan of some albums, but Metallica fan, the people that I look at and I go, you're a fucking fan like me, is when they love Load and Reload and Saint Anger and Lulu. They love all of those. They love all of those things. Yeah. So yeah, it really grew on me. And so here we are now celebrating the 20th anniversary, and I listened to it again today. Like earlier today, I was working and I just had it going on my desk speakers, and I still hear things in it that I didn't quite catch. Yep. It's not like it's layered or intricately produced, but sometimes there's backup vocal things that I didn't remember were there. Sometimes there's little there's like a one note thing in All Within My Hands that Kirk does towards the end, where he just goes, Pow! And I'm like, oh, that was like a little, like half a second solo. and so it's like, it's still all these little things that pop up, and then parts that I didn't really like before are becoming these parts that I'm just like, oh, this is fucking awesome. So I love the whole thing now, but
yes.
I
want to say, well, I want to defend All Within My Hands. I know a lot of people prefer the acoustic or the acoustic electric version they did at this most recent All Within My Hands show.
Yeah.
But here's another thing. All Within My Hands is the album version, is the greatest closer of any Metallica album. It's really good. That the notes they play at the end, for some reason that, and the way that it ends, it all kind of falls apart. I'm like, love it.
It's pretty cool. Pretty cool.
And then I'm one of the 5 people, I guess, I don't know, who love the kill, kill, kill part, because here's why it's brilliant. First, when James starts saying it, his voice is kind of clear, but then you see him descend into instability. You see him descend into fear. You see him descend into all these emotions that get tucked away. And it's just, to me, it's one of the most cathartic moments ever put onto a record.
Yeah.
And so he goes, kill, 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 kill. And he goes, kill, kill, kill. And he's like, kill, kill, kill. And he's like,
yeah,
just screaming. And how can anyone hate that? This is someone bearing their soul. It's one of the most beautiful things. And again, the greatest Metallica closer. I don't care.
so to play devil's advocate, like we know the story behind the album.
Yeah.
People that don't really want to know the story and just don't like how it sounds, in their brain, it's like, oh, here's this millionaire douchebag yelling kill, kill, kill over and over again at the end of an album. So I there's like part of me that I go, I see that, but also like I know where you're coming from, and I love that part just because I know I just from what you know from the documentary and everything, I feel like every little thing he was doing, not only was he kind of pushing himself outside of his comfort zone, but past that, they were putting those things on a record. So it could have just been that he did 2 or 3 different takes, and one of them it was just a shout and there was no voice cracking or anything. But they chose to be like, no, 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 we're going to put that one where your voice sounds fucked up on it. And the fact that I think that says a lot about where he was, because that, sure, he still got to have a say in what went out, but there was now an uncertainty where the general public who's ready for a yeah is getting like a go at the end of an album. So it's just the whole idea of the album, and the thing that people seem to forget, and they forget this about the Black Album, and they forget this about Load, and Lulu. They forget that they didn't have a crystal ball or a time machine to tell them that this was going to be successful or unsuccessful. So, Black Album, they decided to make this bold thing and be like, fuck it, we're going to try to make a version of Metallica that can just be blown out all over the world in stadiums, and, you know, make shorter versions of our songs, to the point songs, maybe a little bit more rock and roll, less metal. And they did it. Could have had the exact same reception that the self-titled Motley Crue album with John Corabi had. It could have just come out. They could have made 2 or 3 videos and then gone nowhere. They didn't know that. Same thing with Load, which Load and Saint Anger, you know, despite what people think, were both successful albums. They just weren't as successful as the Black Album, right? But I mean, if you put out an album and it goes #1 in a bunch of different countries, I think you're pretty successful. So, but yeah, so I just think that they kept taking these chances, and still do, you know, in certain ways. There are parts of their music that I can accept the argument that some things they do is a little in the Metallica safe space. They do got some of that. But I think that everything they've ever done, if you take yourself back to when they were doing it, what was going on with music around them and their music, there's so many things on every single album that you go, there's no way they could have known whether or not it was going to work or not work. And kudos to them for not just being like, well, we have these songs that are leftovers from Load in the Black Album. We'll kind of put out this middle of the road rock album. And then, you know, it'll be produced by Rob Robinson. So it'll have more of a harder edge. They could have just done that. And then just sort of ridden off, you know, cashed their checks and moved on with their lives. But they put out this album that they had to have known that it was strange. I mean, they did. And all of the choices they made, like, you know, however the decision was made for the having no guitar solos, which obviously they argued about, the snare sound, and the length of the songs, the kind of vocals they were doing, the way they chose to produce the album, all of those things, they knew that they were putting out something that's like, well, this could just go horribly wrong. And in some ways it did, but not really. I mean, it's still, there are tons of bands that put out unsuccessful albums and they look at Saint Anger and go, well, fuck them. That's unsuccessful.
Well, I have a question for you, because for me, Load was the seed, Saint Anger was the seedling, and 72 Seasons is the blossom flower. And all of these things have to do predominantly with James's process of dealing with his mental health. And I wonder if that's the underlying reason people don't like Load. I know musically it was a shift, but underneath all that was an exploration around mental health. And then Saint Anger, it was sort of the acknowledgement that there was a problem in Load, but Saint Anger was just like an immediate reaction to whatever problems were going on. And then 72 Seasons, they had some time to mull over, to process, to do some healing. And that's the result of that. But with Load, because he talked about, he was seeing a therapist at that time or getting some counseling or something. Mm-hmm. But Saint Anger, do you think with the movie, with Saint Anger, the album, with all of these other things, people, it's sort of James Hetfield was this person that people look to as this sort of definition of what a strong man is. And so when you have Load And then Saint Anger, it's like, wait, James Hetfield's being vulnerable. I can't deal with that. This is hard for me. They
Yeah.
suck. Those albums are horrible. What are your thoughts around that?
I I understand it because for me, like James Hetfield was, I wouldn't necessarily, assign it to masculine or feminine, but it's more like he was the example of the metal frontman. It was like somebody fronting a metal band. He was the archetype for me. I was just like, holy shit. It's like everything about him. Like he couldn't sing as well as Bruce Dickinson or Rob Halford, but his presence, his guitar playing, the kind of vocals he did, and the lyrics that he wrote, all of it, I was just like, yeah, this is a bad motherfucker that's up there. So when you get to Load, like we'll go off track to Load for a second, but I remember when I first heard Load, I was working at Best Buy in the music department in '96, and we had plans to go to Tower Records at midnight to pick up Load when it came out. And we're closing up, and on the local like rock radio station, they're like, well, we're going to play the new Metallica album in its entirety tonight. And we're like, well, shit, while we're closing up, crank that shit up, and then we'll go buy it. And I just remember the Ain't My Bitch started, and I worked with another really big Metallica fan. And I remember we were both had a discussion like, who the fuck wrote these lyrics? They are the worst. Like, what the hell? It's because it was like the fact that the first two lines are out of my way, out of my day.
Out of my day.
You could have fucking written that in your sleep or on the toilet. Just been like, all right, out of my way. What rhymes with way? Day. Out of my day. Like, that's just the laziest fucking writing ever. But in the grand scheme of the song, once you get to know the song better, I'm like, all right, I get it. I get the kind of writing he was going for. Everything about that album made more sense the more that I listened to it. But in the beginning, that wasn't James Hetfield. That wasn't. I was just like, what the fuck happened? And it was, and they cut their hair, which I know we weren't supposed to care about, but I really did, because my hair was grown out. 96, I had this hair, just no beard. It was like long blonde hair. But and even today, there's a funny joke that me and my co-host on Cranked and Ranked say sometimes, where whenever there's a new metal band that comes out and we go look at a picture of them and they have short hair, we're always like, they're not really committed to this. I don't think this band's going to be around for very long. If they haven't already grown their hair out, then they're not in this for the long haul. But anyway, so I grew to like it. But you have a point, like. It's even worse. You get to Saint Anger, and the vocals, are maybe not, but they're more aggressive, I guess, overall. But you still have these lyrics that seem very out of place for James. But that's only because it's the James that we know or we knew. And, like from Saint Anger, the line that used to make me cringe was I want my anger to be healthy. And I was just like, this is a Metallica lyric? Like, that seems like, you hear that lyric and you go, oh, that's from Therapy. Like that's a therapy lyric right there. Probably written by Phil Towle himself. Who knows? But that was a thing that I had to get used to. But luckily, for people like me, James came back to being more James-ish, vocally speaking.
Pushing battle rip his can, touching body mannequins, spilling tongue through your gas, like that.
Yeah, exactly. That song in particular. But the important thing about all of that is the fact that all of those decisions are what made me the huge Metallica fan that I am. And this is still off topic, but I may have said this on the episode when we were talking about Metallica, but I remember being such a huge fan of Death Magnetic. And then I remember being up late one night and they announced like the new Metallica is going to be this collaboration with Lou Reed. And I was just like, that's fucking weird. And then the song came out and I remember listening to it and in my head going, this is going to piss so many people off. This is fucking awesome. This is the greatest band ever. And And that's what literally both of those things are what makes the best band in the world to me. You put out an album that's one of the most iconic metal albums of all time, but then 20 or whatever years later, you put out an album where you're just like, fuck you. You know? So I absolutely love them for that. And so, and Saint Anger is a really big piece of that puzzle because it was, you know, everything about that album from the album to the documentary is them completely out of their comfort zone, except for maybe, you know, I guess, you know, Kirk doesn't have much, you know, going on because he doesn't do any solos, and I don't think he actually wrote any of the riffs, or maybe he did. I don't really know. What I want them to do though, because I know eventually they'll do like a box set, you know, for Saint Anger. And if you, and, you know, if you watch Some Kind of Monster, there's certain scenes where you hear music that's not on the album, and I'm like, just take those tapes and just put them on CDs or vinyl or however you want to blow them out, because I just want to listen to the process of them putting it. I want to hear that fucking Temptation song, you know. I want to hear like Temptation wrecks my soul. Temptation filled the hole. We're gonna get a copyright strike off that.
Ooh, sorry.
I'm just kidding. But but yeah. So there's so much left behind from that album that I hope we get to hear it. But
yeah, the Presidio tapes. Yeah.
so just to address the elephant in the room, I guess, when it comes to some people watching this video, when you first started listening to the album, did the snare make any difference to you whatsoever, or did it even register that it was unusual the way he had it tuned, or any of that?
Well, I just
because you're a drummer, you play drums.
Ready to say that.
Yeah,
and I want to say at this point in my life, Lars Ulrich is my greatest musical inspiration. I love Lars, and I get it. No one is immune from critique, but he does not warrant the amount of hate he does. In terms of your question, I was like, well, yeah, I get why people aren't into it. But as you were talking about, the more you listen to it, even the guitar solos, it's like, I play guitar not as good as you and not as good as Kirk Hammett, but at the end, none of that bothers me. I think it is a perfect album. Its imperfections make it perfect. Yeah. And what lies underneath that snare is some of Lars's best drumming on any album. I don't care what that. You listen to Purify, which is my favorite song of Saint Anger. I mean, it's some of his most adventurous drumming. Just listen to what happens beyond the snare, and I guarantee you will appreciate what he does.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of double kick on that as well.
Yeah,
and that's one of the things that you know people will even today say, like, you know, Lars can't play that. I'm like, all you got to do is watch the DVD that comes with Saint Anger, and you see him playing the songs with the double kick. Like it's it's all there. Yeah, the snare to me has never been a problem. It's actually been a feature of the album for me. And the funny thing is now, because back in the day, there were some random, maybe like hardcore bands and stuff that had that similar snare sound. But now, the death metal world with like, you know, Brutal Slam and all this other kind of death metal, the death metal kind of offshoots, so many of those bands are using that sound. And not only that, I've seen interviews with death metal bands where they reference Saint Anger's the snare as like that was what they were going for, was that snare sound. And so in its own little way, it's kind of coming back around. But you are right, like I think that's probably what annoys me, is that everyone that isn't a Metallica fan thinks that we all think that Lars is the best drummer ever, and he's not the best drummer ever. He'll be the first person to tell you he's not the best drummer ever. But he does what he does, and he is that band. He is Metallica. He's even though the face of it and the voice of it, you know, except for interviews, is James. Mm-hmm. the guy making it all happen for the most part is Lars. He's the one that started the band. He's been pushing them forward through everything that happened to them over the years. And yeah, and I really think that it's the fact that he comes across as a little bit full of himself sometimes, and or maybe not full of himself, but he has a quality where he does seem like a rich kid that kind of hit it big, and he's just
only child. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I get why people look for reasons to not like him. I'm like, well, it's not his fault that was how he was born. And at the same time, there's plenty of rich people who started bands that went nowhere. So, it's just one of those things where I think that you're right. It's like people go overboard with the hate, but most of the time, they're people that don't really know much about him, or if they're talking about Napster, they don't actually know much about the Napster case. They just know the memes or the whatever that came up around it. And every time, and I always want to tell them, is it weird that you're still talking about Napster when like every musician now agrees with Lars?
Right. And even Dave Grohl, when that whole thing was going on, he was openly critical of it, and he came out and said, yeah, I was wrong about that. So, and there were artists who supported what Lars and by extension Metallica were saying and doing, but they didn't want their audience to be compromised or whatever, or their relationship to the artist or their record sales or whatever. And getting back to Lars and the snare and everything, it's interesting. My first instance of, in my mind, I'm sure there were other things, but my first instance of hearing the snare being turned off was Strapping On by Helmet. And so that was my reference point. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that was my reference point to that. So hearing Saint Anger, I'm like, okay, this I've heard this before. And you hear people redoing it with better drums. It doesn't sound right. No. It doesn't sound right at all. The snare is a huge part of the character of that album. And so the way the drums are mic'd or whatever, how Lars does it, it's great because they're doing it in a live setting. But to have the same record and then just putting differently EQ drums on it, it sounds terrible.
Yeah, well, it's every little aspect of that album, not only the snare, but the detuning of the guitars, the very dry vocals, like everything about that is what makes the album great. And it goes perfectly. Like, I feel like, I don't know if how much of a decision that was for Bob Rock, because if that's the case, then Bob Rock should be getting a lot of kudos because he's made some amazing sounding albums. But in that particular case, if he was making those decisions and he steered them into a production style that was perfect for the content of the album. So I don't know. I wouldn't change anything about it. And it's funny because we talked about Napster, but that actually goes into the "Shoot Me Again" song a little bit.
Yeah.
But there's so many little moments in that album that are like, there's stuff that James will do on some songs, and it's mostly once he became, James. Like early stuff, you don't hear it very much, but there's like a moment on it's All Nightmare Long. The way he does that, your luck runs out, like that. The first time I heard that, I laughed out loud because I was like, that's fucking awesome. And then the same thing goes for just like, is it My World, where it does like the sucker in that song? Because it's so, it's kind of silly, but at the same time, I'm still like, if he didn't do that, that part of the song would not be as cool. Right. So
well, the funny thing is, as you were talking, I was thinking about what happens because I am a fan of dry vocals. And I know a lot of people, reverb. I'm a fan of a drier sound. So Death Magnetic, I love. Yeah. When you listen to a song like Sweet Amber and what happens with the mic, and it's when it sounds like he doesn't have a
A
like
pop
a pop
filter.
filter. Yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't sound like a pop filter. It probably did if he's using an SM7 because they have internal pop filters, but it's like, how sweet does it get? Like that,
Yeah.
and you
Well,
just
he just
hear the
has it so
mic.
close to his mouth
Right,
that, yeah, yeah.
right. Just things like that, where normally if that was Black Album or Load Reload, you wouldn't have things like that going on.
No.
Bob Rock would be like, get away from the mic. We're doing
Yeah.
this over.
Yeah. You
Just
don't, you
things
don't
like
need to hold
that.
it.
Exactly. So it's like, how sweet does it get? And
Yeah.
it's just things like that I love about it. And I haven't heard anybody even mention that part, but just these little elements like you were saying when Kirk just plays one part. And
Yeah.
it's just really, if people want to go because people are like, well, I like Sweet Amber, I like this. So people look at it more as liking the parts as opposed to the sum. And we're defending the sum because the
Yeah.
whole thing is about the experience. It's a book. And so Frantic is an acknowledgement that, again, there is a problem. Am I wasting my days away with the life that I've done? And then all within my hand is the acknowledgement of like, here's the reason why we're doing this album.
Yeah.
And it's just, each song is a chapter. And you don't see too many albums, Metallica albums even like that. I think 72 Seasons might have those elements. And on a different level, maybe Kill 'Em All, I don't know. But I think that Saint Anger is a book in and of itself. And each chapter, like Shoot Me Again, then you have Sweet Amber, then you have, Purify. And Purify, to me, I'm gonna maintain this. I think that Room of Mirrors is the Purify of 72 Seasons, because it's about the lyrics, tear it down, strip the layers off, my turpentine. Like that's, to me, says the same thing.
Yeah.
In Room of Mirrors, it's stripping away whatever facade you have when you are out there. You have to take all of that off when you do internal work. And so to me, these are beautiful things, and people are focused on, well, the riffs are lazy or the drums or this or that, but what's actually going on? And that's the thing I connect to with Saint Anger, what's actually happening inside of the collective of the album.
Yeah. I agree with every single thing that you said. Yeah, and at the end of the day, you know that it has a lot to do with the fact that they did an album like Master of Puppets, and so everything is being judged against that. Or even people that came in later on, with the Black Album is what they're judging everything against. And so I guess I understand that, but I also don't give any credit to those kind of people, because there's a certain kind of music fan, I'm using air quotes for fan, because and I've talked about this recently on podcast episodes, and some people tell me that I'm wrong for thinking this way, but I started doing what I do because I eat, sleep, and breathe music, and have for almost 40 years. And not only that, but every single thing that I've loved, I've wanted to know everything I can about it. And the things that I don't love, I don't talk about.
Right.
So whenever I'm talking about something, it's sure I have my opinions, but I also know a whole lot about not only what I'm talking about, in this case, let's say Saint Anger, but also I've been in bands, I've recorded albums, I've done recording myself, I've written songs, hundreds of songs over the years, played guitar, done vocals, all of these things. I've done all of these things. So putting all that together, I always try to present like a very thoughtful critique of some things.
Yes.
And it bums me out that not everybody in the world wants to do that. So somebody else has a very strong opinion on Saint Anger, but in reality, in their life, when they come home from work, they don't even listen to music. They
Mhm.
they binge a show on Netflix, or they're playing a video game, or they're watching a football game, and if there's music on, it's in the background. But as soon as somebody posts something online, they got to be like, "Oh, I know Saint Anger sucks," and I'm like, I know we're all supposed to be free to express our opinions, but some of you are not qualified. So, so it just bums me out because I have not only gone out of my way to like know all these things, but I'll also go out of my way that if somebody does post something from like Slipknot, who I don't like, I'm not going to be like, they fucking suck and let me tell you why. Because I'm just like, that's not my music.
Right.
That's not a part of my life. That's not anything that I know a whole lot about. So I'm not going to say a fucking word about it. So because
Right.
and we did Slipknot on Cranked and Ranked, and I talked a lot of shit, but
Right.
I tried to do it in a way where I was just like coming at this from a person that's now just listening to all of this, and I have my own biases. Here's what I think. But so with Saint Anger, that it's one of the albums that it really really bums me out that people are so just not thoughtful. If somebody just presents like, oh, tonight I'm listening to Saint Anger, and then somebody's got a comment below to it, why, or that album fucking sucks, and it's just, and I said this on the episode that we did together of your podcast, that I think some people have just not had enough bad stuff happen to them, and so they feel like it's important to say things like that. And I was like, if you got your ass kicked a whole bunch of times, you'd probably think a little more. Not saying anybody should kick anybody's ass, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah.
There are those of
Yeah.
us that have been through shit, and so we pick our battles, and so it's just like,
Right.
I don't like that, but I'm gonna go do something else, and
Right.
that's all I'm trying to say. If anybody takes anything away from this episode, just leave Saint Anger alone, and Brittany. Leave both of them.
Yo, so I actually, you talked about Slipknot. I don't know that much about new metal.
Uh-huh.
There's a few songs that I've heard, but Saint Anger consistently gets a new metal comparison.
Yeah.
For me, when I hear Saint Anger, I hear a lot of like Chicago indie stuff like Jesus Lizard. I hear things like that. But I also love bands like Jesus Lizard. So
Yeah.
those are the references I'm getting. Like when I hear All Within My Hands, I'm hearing Jesus Lizard.
So
or bands like Flint or something.
Yeah, that could explain why you and I connect to this, because I'm into a lot of that stuff too. But
Yeah.
if you are a person that's like, the archetype for metal for me is Dio, and I want everything to be Dio, then of course when you hear something like Saint Anger, it's not your cup of tea in the slightest. Snare or no snare, doesn't fucking matter. But yeah, and I hear the new metal, but I think it's only because when I first heard songs from it, that was when that shit was huge.
Yeah.
And I like some new metal, but once again, I'm a fan of Limp Bizkit, a band that gets
Right.
unfairly shit talked all the time. And I'm just like, look, I realize that Fred Durst's persona was that he was an asshole, but I think he's proven over the years that that really wasn't who he was. And if you take him away from the equation, that is a fucking talented band of dudes there. I mean, they are insanely good. But anyway, that's a different story. But around that time, like, Metallica was touring with Limp Bizkit and Korn and all these other people, and so obviously those influences would be there. But I don't know. I think at the time it was easy to write it off and say, yeah, they heard the new metal stuff, and so they did this stripped down, version. But if that were the case, the chorus of Saint Anger wouldn't have been a fast galloping beat. It would have been
Right.
like a more groovy thing, because no new metal band was doing. Maybe Slipknot did them a little bit, or have done them, but that's it. So I really do think that, just like with every Metallica album, like you go back to Kill 'Em All, they've got new wave of British heavy metal and Motorhead and these other things that they're incorporating with their music. And I think as they move on a little bit, there are definite influences that maybe aren't as easy to tell, because they got better at incorporating them into their songwriting as opposed to wearing them on their sleeves or whatever. But yeah, I just think that there's so much to talk about with Saint Anger that just gets minimized to these like little things.
Yeah.
And
Well, there's the part. Okay, there is a band from that era, System of a Down, that I absolutely love, and
yeah,
so maybe at the not only do I not know the answer,
yeah,
maybe that stuff like that.
yeah.
But or shoot me again. I won't go, but maybe that System of a Down. But overall, I don't hear a lot of that. And again, I don't have new metal as a direct reference point. So again,
Sure.
I hear more Chicago, like 90s Chicago indies touch and go. That's my reference point.
Yeah.
So I don't know.
But that's great, and I really hope this whole thing, if people are sticking around, it opens up your eyes or ears a little bit. I'm not saying everyone needs to like this album. I understand why it's not liked,
Right.
but I also think it's very valid that there are so many of us that really like it. Like I put it above, Reload easily.
Yeah.
I put when it comes to like this is going to be sacrilegious, but for how many times I listen to it, I put it above Kill 'Em All. Like I will listen to Saint Anger before Kill 'Em All. Maybe it's because I've heard Kill 'Em All hundreds of times and I got burnt out on it, but I really do, and it's moved up. I would think that because there's there's the ranking that I would do in my head of trying to look at things objectively and what they did with the albums and what they accomplished and what they were and how different were they from each other, then Saint Anger might not fall quite as high. But if you're talking about sheer enjoyment and albums that I constantly feel myself wanting to listen to, then it's like third or fourth probably in line for me. Just because I still get so much out of it, not only listening to the music, but just like like I have a little like shower speaker, and it's a Bluetooth shower speaker. So some mornings I just throw on some music and I just will shuffle things. And there's been times that songs from Saint Anger have come on, and I'm just like, I just want to start my day every day just like this. Because it just like there's a combination of adrenaline and sort of a joyous silliness that I feel when I listen to that album, because I don't have the same connection to it that they did when they made it, because I wasn't going through anything. So I listen to the album. I like the songs, but I also in my head I hear Lars saying shit like, he fucking left the band, and stuff like that. And
I know that part in my sleeve. So fucking like the band. Which part of that forgot? And which part of that got left out of the equation? Fucking retarded to the bed, guys. I don't understand that part. Yeah.
I just like that weird noise he makes where he goes, ah! Or something like that.
Exclamation point. Yeah.
No, I'm with you. I absolutely love Lars, and I think that I get some of the Lars hate, but I don't get the amount of it. But I've always said that like that's how I know, that's how I'm going to know when I finally made it as like I don't necessarily need to be a YouTuber, but a music personality. If I ever actually make it, I'll know that I made it when I'm talking to Lars Ulrich. Like that's like talking to James Hetfield would be great, but there's something about Lars that I want to have. I want to have a beer and a conversation with him. I feel like James and I might butt heads on a couple things here. I don't know, maybe. Right. But with Lars, I just feel like even if I, barely get a word in edgewise, I'm just going to sit back and just be like, you tell me some stories and whatever,
When we played the Cow Palace on September 12th, 1986. I don't know.
I love that you got the in there. It's very important.
He'll talk to you about film. He'll talk to you
about my co-host on Cranked and Ranked sometimes will do that impression where he goes, this part really makes my dick hard.
Oh my God. I love Lars so
Yeah, he's great.
So one of the critiques that could be valid, because
Hmm.
nothing's perfect. I think Saint Anger is perfect, but in reality, nothing's perfect.
Yeah.
The repetition, the cut and paste element. What are your thoughts around that? Because albums like Justice for All also had the cut, copy, and paste element,
Yeah.
and you can definitely hear it if you listen close. But Saint Anger, because there were no solos, and some there might have been some vocal cut and paste things going on. But do you think that the critique is warranted?
No.
Okay.
Even with just if you think about Justice for All, they had to fucking cut tape and splice it
Yeah.
together. So it had to be like, different drum takes. And he's like, oh, that section right there I like better. Can you cut that out and put it there? Probably annoyed the fuck out of the engineers. But with Saint Anger, they had the technology to literally just cut and paste and move things around. And other artists, like an electronic artist does that, and people look at it as like an art form. Like, well, why can't that be incorporated into metal and other music as well? Because sometimes you could write a perfectly good song. Like, I remember back in the early 2000s, I was in a band and we recorded our entire EP ourselves. We rented the equipment, we did it in our practice space, and then we went to a guy to mix it. And he started doing these things where he's like, well, what if we silence this part here at this part? Or what if we take this part and move it over here? And he literally made the songs better, where I was just like, I never would have thought of that. And the fact that there was the technology to be like, we're just going to move this over. And I was just like, and it's so much better that way. So I think that, if you're a purist, like if you're like into like black metal and you want it to be, recorded in a garage on a jam box or whatever. Well, that dated me. Jam box. Who says that anymore? That's like 10-year-old me. Mom, can I have a jam box for Christmas? And I got one. But or as some people would call them, a ghetto blaster. But
Oh yes.
but yeah, so I'm just saying those kind of recordings, if that's what you're expecting, then sure, that's fine. But the fact that we now live in a world where people are just making albums on their laptop and it's literally just like, okay, copy and paste that. And I'm just like, that, everybody does that. Like, there's probably, there are still bands that you hear that they record the basic tracks live, but
Right.
after they're done with that, there's overdubs, there's editing, there's other shit that goes on. So I don't have any problem with that. In fact, I think it makes it more interesting because it makes me as a fan go like, oh, can we hear the song before you rearranged it? Or can we, like, in the movie, you hear Sweet Amber with a guitar solo. And I'm like, I want to hear that. Like, can I hear that version of the song that has the solo? Because the way the song stands right now, the part that plays in the movie, even the guitar that plays underneath it, I'm like, is that even in the song at all? Like, I don't even remember. It's so all those things just make it even more interesting to me. But I'm never like, we're both in our mid to late 40s. So there are a lot of people our age and older that are very like, get off my lawn when it comes to like technology and shit. But I've never felt that way. Like, I want the newest cool shit whenever it's there. And if I, was in a band and we were going to go to the studio, I would want to have the most high-tech equipment because, like, in the instance that I do want, some auto tune on my vocals or whatever, like I want that to be a part of it because I'm just like, well, this is how this has evolved. And if you're fighting it, you might as well just be fighting evolution of everything, and that doesn't make you a very nice person, does it? But I'm just, yeah. So it doesn't bother me. I really, because I know they do it now, and I know that even on the newer album, there's tons of stuff that if we looked into it, if we looked at the file, there's probably all kinds of edits and all this shit going on, and I'm just like, it just goes with being in a band, and that's how music is made now. It's it's not back in the day with four guys around one microphone, and then And then they do like the in the Kings of Comedy where he does that thing where they dance around and they come right back to the mic.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
It's not like that anymore. They don't got to do that. They all have wireless mics on now.
And ears and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, I don't know if they're gonna release a lot of the what's it? I was gonna say tuning room, but HQ stuff.
Yeah. I really think that when it gets to St. Anger, they're gonna do a box with all kinds of stuff that we've never heard before on it.
Oh man, I hope so. Wait, before I forget, so I'm
Okay.
gonna do my little show and tell.
Oh yeah,
I
yeah.
forgot.
This is a good way to wrap this up. Let's do your show and tell of your stuff.
So I actually forgot. I have a couple of the discs with the Ramones songs on it, but they're over there. I'm not gonna go get them. But I have the 45 RPM.
Oh, I don't have
The
that
Warner
one.
Brothers. This was I'm looking for this one, and
Yeah, I want that one.
Yeah. And I have this is the Walmart one, I think. Yeah, this is the Walmart. I think it's orange. Yeah. And I have two cassettes, two versions.
Oh, that's okay. That's the thing. I don't have this album on cassette, and I need to do something about that. Okay, that's awesome.
And one is Indonesia, and I can't remember where the other one's from. Then I have two CDs. So one's Vertigo and one's Electra.
Yeah.
And I have actually one of them on the wall. I'm like, hey. And then this one is the black variant of Blackened. And then this one is the OG Vertigo.
Oh, you have the Vertigo.
Yeah. Wait. No, this is the Warner Brothers. I do have the Vertigo. This is the Warner Brothers half speed master, the 33 RPM.
Cool. Yeah.
And then this is the Vertigo one. OG.
Nice.
And then the Electra OG. So, yeah.
See, that's awesome. I really want, out of all those, I want I want to get all the Warner Brothers 45 ones, but those are never going to be cheap ever again. So
no, yeah, I scope the internet for stuff that's pretty affordable. If it's not affordable, I won't get it. So yeah, all this stuff I got because it was reasonably priced. But the one thing I want, which I will never have in my lifetime because it will probably never be under $500, is the yellow variant of the CD. That's the one that I want.
Like the cover is yellow?
Yeah.
Oh,
so
yeah.
Remember how they were originally going to do the 4 colors? And so they had a limited pressing of the yellow one with a purple fist, and then they stopped it. So I think a bunch of them were at Walmart or something. And I think it's a clean version. Okay. So I think because at the time, all the versions that went to Walmart were clean versions. So that's the one that I'm really looking for. I doubt if I would ever get it because there were only like a few hundred pressings, I think, or something, or maybe under that. I don't know, but it's very limited. So I've seen people make videos with them or whatever, but yeah, that one, good luck.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it took me a while to find an OG Electra, and I ended up getting it on eBay. And it's a little bit worn, but not too bad. But it only cost me, I think, like $65 or something like that. It wasn't. It may have been $80. It was under $100. And it was just one of those things where I think it was the timing was right. And I'm one of those eBay assholes that I don't bid until the last like 10 seconds. Yeah. So I'm ready. I mean, it's like coffee, whatever. I'm just like, nobody else is fucking getting this. So anyway, so that's how I got that. I stole it from somebody else. Somebody else who bid on it a week before and was really hoping his bid would go through. I'm like, nope, sorry, dude.
Yeah, I would see it on eBay like $300 for this. I'm not getting there. So yeah, I would scout in and just sit and wait.
Yeah.
Until
Isn't it funny how these albums that are apparently shitty are going for so much money?
Like Lulu, I saw on Discogs. I mean, I have Lulu on vinyl too.
Yeah,
I love Lulu, but I saw it on Discogs, the original Warner Brothers. I have a Vertigo but the original Warner Brothers was $4,000.
Oh, I
Why
have
is
it.
Lulu $4,000?
Yeah, I have that. I have that one, but and that one was. I think I may have actually paid over 100 for that, but I don't
Yeah.
really remember. But that was worth it. Well, that's for another video when they do
Lulu.
the Lulu 20th anniversary. We'll do this again.
Oh man.
But
You can't put a butterfly in a jar.
still, my favorite part of that album is that part where he goes, "All right, go James," or something like that.
I love it. Yeah. Yeah. He's like, okay, I'm going. Oh, I love it so much. I will defend, and I know we're gonna go. I will defend Junior Dad like I defend Saint Anger. I will just say that. I mean, I love that album, but Junior Dad, I will absolutely defend that song.
But that, yeah, what I'm telling you, we'll do a video on that one.
Yes.
But I feel like we've gone as far as we can go with Saint Anger. Everyone gets the point. We really like this album, and here are the reasons.
No,
But,
they get the period exclamation point.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect. All right. So yeah. So if you missed it in the beginning, this is Jamilah. She does the Music and We podcast, which I'll put a link in the description. And yeah, this has been a great way to celebrate the 20th anniversary of an album that's very important to me and you. And if there's any of you out there that feel the same way, put something in the comments and let us know. If you don't like this album, you probably already stopped watching this video, and you probably already put something snarky in the comments anyway. But whatever. That's the internet, ladies and gentlemen. So yeah. So that's how you end things on my channel. You're just gonna go, oh, all right, bye. Anyway.
Happy birthday, Saint Anger! Yeah.
Oh yeah, happy birthday, Saint Anger. Hopefully they'll play songs from this on the tour when I go see them. Don't tell me.
I'm not, but I'm going to download. I guess when this airs, download will be in a few days. But on the original date that St. Anger was supposed to happen, which was June 10th, they're headlining one of the shows. So June 8th and June 10th, I hope they do a mini St. Anger set or something, because it'll just make my world so happy, and I'll scream. You'll probably, even though I'm outside, everyone will still hear me.
You're gonna be that from that TikTok thing where it's like, excuse my scream, and the guy goes, ah, or something like that.
That's gonna be me. I'll be like, what's wrong with you? It's like,
well, hopefully they do. Hopefully they play something when I see them. And you'll see the concert I'm going to. You'll see in theaters across the world.
Yes, I'm gonna go to that. Yes, so I'll probably see you on screen.
I'm gonna try my best to like flag down the cameraman. I'm gonna wear my old head hat. I'm gonna try my best, but we'll see. I'm gonna be way up in the nosebleeds because I didn't have enough money to get any of the cool tickets.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been a pleasure and an amazing conversation with you once again. Yeah, we'll do this again soon. So,
Yes,
and
please.
for all of you out there, thank you for watching, and we'll see you soon.